Hey everyone, this is Connie with Constantly Stamping. Today I have another fun project for you using the mini muslin bags from the Holiday Mini Catalog. So, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to stamp just some regular gift tissue paper, and we're going to stamp it with the black, jet black Stays On ink. And I'm going to just go down here, let's see, in the corner. I know that I want this to go off the edge of my bag, and the reason I want it to go off the edge is I want to avoid the top right, or actually just the top edge altogether, so that my bag will cinch up. So I'm just going to stamp that, and then I'm going to stamp again on a post-it note. I'm going to mask it off. Now here's a little trick. It's just as easy to cut one mask as it is to cut three. So when you stamp it, just leave your post-it notes together, and then just you'll have three masks when you get finished instead of one. And then you just put those in your case with your stamps, and that way you can always have a mask when you need it and not have to do it every single time. And they're fine. Once you've used them, you can go back and you can reuse them. You're going to cover this up, and then I need my leaf. I'm going to ink this up also in Stays On ink. Now that I have the flower mask off, let's see, I'm going to stamp once here and once down here. And then, just like the flower, I need to mask off my leaves, and so you can see here I cut more than one. I've used one already, but there's two there. So I'm just going to take this one, mask that off, and then I'm going to stamp here, and just pull that mask off and reuse it up here. Let's see. There we go. Now, when you remove the mask, I just love masking. I just think it's the neatest thing in the world. It's one of my favorite techniques. So when you remove it, then you have this great looking flower with the leaves. I love it. So what you're going to do is you're going to trim this out, and then we're going to decoupage it, put it on our bag. Okay, now I have my artwork cut out, and I'm going to use the Mod Podge matte medium, and I'm going to apply the Mod Podge to the back of the artwork that I have stamped. And I work from the center out so that I can be careful not to tear my tissue. This is kind of the delicate stage, so you want to carefully cover that. We'll set that aside, and then I want it down in this corner, so I'm going to actually lay my bag on it. I'm going to press it down. See if we can't get that to come up. Great. So I'm going to let that dry for a minute, and then I'm going to come back and put another coat of Mod Podge on there. Okay, so I've let that dry a little bit, and then I'm going to come back and put a second coat. Well, actually, this is the first coat. I did put a coat on the back, but this is the first coat on top. So I'm trying to avoid getting any on the fabric. I want to just stay on top of the artwork. I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll be back for the next step. We've let this dry, and so now we need to work on the background. So I'm going to start with the Marina Mist Classic Pad. I'm going to get a little bit of ink in the lid, and then I'm just going to use my paintbrush and mix a little bit of color with that. Then I'm just going to start along the edge and pull the color out. And I'm trying not to actually touch the flower. You need to make sure that you have the background exactly the way you want it before you move on to the flower. So I'm just put a little more ink in the lid. And I'm just going to do a little bit deeper color right here. Didn't water this down as much. I'm just going to work my way around. So pretty. Okay, and then I'll take the lighter wash and I'll just brush out to the edges. Okay, I've let that dry. I've used a heat tool to dry it up a little bit. Then I'm just going to take a sponge and some more of the Marina Mist ink, and I'm just going to go ahead and sponge on out toward the edges. Just give it a little more color. Okay. Next I'm going to take the baked brown sugar and I am going to sponge around the edges. Now this baked brown sugar is like a really dark tea stain, so I'm just going to work my way around the edges. It's really pretty though. When you blend that together, it really gives it a vintage look. And you want to do all of this. You'll notice I put my chipboard that's covered in wax paper in the bag, and that's just to give it a little stability while I was working on the front. So I'm coloring the edges a little bit with the ink, sponging that on, blending it in, and then finally I'm going to switch to the early espresso and just lightly around the edges. I want it to have a very vintage look, so I'm just lightly going around the edges, just a little bit darker color, not much at all. Now I haven't done anything to the back, but you can if you want, but just for the sake of this video we're not going to. So now I'm at this point. Now this is dry, and I don't exactly know how to explain it, but something happens. The decoupage medium, the Mod Podge, it is water soluble. So if I go over it with a marker, it's going to reactivate the ink, is going to reactivate the Mod Podge, and it will be wet to the touch at first, but what happens is once it dries, it actually, it's almost like it blends with or mixes with the Mod Podge, and then after it's completely dry you can touch it and it won't come off on your fingers. So it's not really permanent. You definitely don't want to get water on this, but for just a gift bag it's just a really fun technique. So I'm coloring the leaves very quickly, and I'm making care not to get it on the bag or on the flower portion. Just going to pull that out. And if I touch this right now, my fingers would be green because it doesn't dry very quickly. What we're going to have to do is when I finish, you can either leave it to dry or you can speed up the process with a heat tool. Just be careful when you use your heat tool that you don't scorch your bag and you don't scorch the flower area or anything like that, because that is paper and it will scorch. So if I want to go in and do some shading, I'm going to come back and do a little bit of shading before it dries. Just with the same marker. You don't have to do anything fancy. Okay. Now we're ready for our red. Now this is a real red marker, and I'm just going to go over the entire flower. And just because I know you don't want to sit here and watch me color the entire flower, I will come back just as I'm finishing up. Okay, I finished coloring my flower. I'm just going back and touching up a few places, adding some shadows. And the artist made it really easy for us to know where to add the shading, because there's some dash lines in here. And I'm just kind of going over those again with the same marker, just to give it a little bit of depth right there. One of the things I really like about this bag is it makes me really feel like an artist. Although I don't really draw, I am still feel like I'm doing an art technique, and I'm putting my spin on something and making something beautiful. So this is really a fun technique. Okay, so we are done with the bag. I'm just going to let this dry, put the cord back in, and then in another video I'm going to show you how to make the tag that goes with this.